You'll never believe how crazy the #1 spot is on this top 10 list for the most powerful DC characters. If you enjoyed this content, please make sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Many more videos are on the way, I promise. Thanks so much for watching. Comics are about as confusing as an eclipse must have been for cave people millions of years ago. You kind of just look up into the sky and drool when someone like me details this, and proves they have absolutely no life at 37 years old. And you kind of just stand there looking up into the sky as your eye sockets burst into flames, and you begin to realize that you just acquired 1,400 subscribers in the last month. And then it hits you like the raptor who attacks from the side. Clever girl.
Clever girl.
Okay, I'm bitten by the popularity potential of lots more subscribers, but let's get past the ego thing for a few minutes, because I need to prepare for the imminent onslaught of hateful comments that will be arriving soon after I post my top 10 strongest beings in DC Comics list here for you today. So put your helmets on if you're on my side of this, because you're gonna need it.
There are questions to be asked, and it is time for you to do so.
There are questions to be asked, Marlon Brando, and I am here to answer them. Here are the top 10 strongest beings in DC Comics, with evidence and no possible way to counter me on this, or argue against it, because anything I say is objective and a fact, and you can't say otherwise. Okay, let's begin. Number 10, the creators, like the presence. Okay, wow, you hate me already?
You shut the up!
You were told by some wiki or forum that the presence is the social alpha of DC Comics, right? And I bet you're rummaging on Google right now with this video paused, so you can go check if something or somebody on the forum somewhere else disagrees with me.
Donald J. Trump is now President of the United States. President Obama.
You shut the fuck up!
And you're gonna find tons of evidence and references to some kids online saying the presence is beyond the overvoid as their noses bleed from the amount of risperidone that they're consuming every 4 to 6 hours 3 times a day in increments of 10 milligrams. The presence loses his power in the void. But just keep your pants on for a second. The void isn't the overvoid, it's called the Garbhodaka void. In the Hindu religion, this is the lower void at the ground floor where creations rise and fall. The comic even confirms the name of this place later in another Lucifer series. More so, the Parliaments got together once and almost killed the presence because they said he was doing a bad job, and Eclipso also cut off the collective unconscious from everyone, and the presence died. Lucifer removed himself from the Book of Destiny, and everyone learned that the presence requires duality to exist. That means without the devil, the presence has no definition and goes back to being non-existent. So, if that isn't enough for you, there's also a guidebook that implies that the presence is not the ultimate and only God out there as the creator. Just food for thought. I'm not even going to get into the Roxogama eating the presence thing, because that gives me severe PTSD. Talk about even more. So, to sum that up, Roxogama ate the presence in Final Crisis and took the Orb of Creation from the Vertigo Lucifer series that the presence held up just to prove he killed him. Number 9. Pralaya, the Garbhodaka personified. This is the void that Lucifer was flying in, otherwise known as the Lucifer White Void. That isn't always white because the comic shows it's all sorts of colors, but anyway. The other name for this void is the Mahapralaya. Yep, Pralaya. This is the void that was confirmed to house every creation and not just the presence's creations. For example, Cestus, a character in the Vertigo Lucifer comics, exists before the presence was made entirely manifest, and she floated in this void until the presence made his creation, then she squatted inside of it and stayed there for a while. This void is beyond all creator gods, and Pralaya even says that to call her a god is an insult. She's above such things. Number 8. The Source. The Source is the originator of the God Wave, the prime entity, otherwise known as the Divine Presence. Just remember, there are thousands of comic book fans who think the term Divine Presence equals the same character named the Presence from the Lucifer comics series. That isn't true. Here is De Mateus on Twitter confirming that the Divine Presence is more of a reference to the thing that started all the gods and that encompasses all of existence, while Lucifer's dad is just the Christian god. This is a huge misconception by wikis and scalers to fully get this wrong. The source is, well, the source of all the gods. Pretty simple stuff. Grant Morrison even calls the source the Ein Sof Or. Just remember this though, because this is super important for the scaling and hierarchy later. The source is the Ein Sof Or from the Jewish Kabbalah religion, and the Ein Sof Or is the lowest of the three veils. Keep that in your brains for just a bit longer. Number 7. Limbo Residence, Retcon, Final Heaven, and the Filth. Above the source would be the edge of the comic book as described in the guidebook by Grant. This is the absolute edge of DC Comics where no characters can go that live below it. Limbo is confirmed as a shared continuity flow. Every single fictional franchise, so it's not just DC Comics. When someone retcons something in Star Wars, they go there. When Marvel retcons something, they go there, and so on. Here also I speculate that this realm is kind of like an onion, with some other lower layers that compose the big layer. The lower realms of Limbo likely include Final Heaven and Retcon Corps. But just remember, Grant also said that the location Greg Feely is from is actually within the Tree of Life of the Kabbalah. The Ein Sof Or is above the Tree of Life according to this religion. Number 6. The Empty Hand. The O.G. Morrison Empty Hand is the personification of all the meta reader's hand closing the comics, and it also represents all of the villains as a single concept. This being is beyond every single villain there is, was, or ever will be in DC Comics, and just note that the Dark Crisis version of this character was revised to mean something else entirely. We're not talking about that later rendition, we're talking about the original. Grant says this character represents us and all of the villains. Number 5. Nyx Wotan. Nyx is the son of Mandrake, and in Final Crisis in the Multiversity series, little Nyx Wotan, the last of the Monitors, is gifted the title of the Judge of All Evil by the Overvoid. His role is kind of similar to the Living Tribunal in Marvel Comics, the cosmic overseer and protector. My logic is that Nyx has total dominion over DC Comics' multiverse, because he was given this job directly by the Overvoid, and the Overvoid wants to make sure nothing can get in or out to infect itself ever again. So naturally and logically, the Overvoid would make sure Nyx has the power he needs to perform his job without problems indefinitely. Number 4. Nil Monitors. A while ago, Grant Morrison took a trip to Nepal, I believe. And while there, Grant took some drugs and had an amazing time. I would think he had an amazing time if I ended up having such an amazing drug trip. But ignoring my own penchant for psychedelics, Grant says that cosmic deities and abstract beings made contact and showed Grant the inner workings of how the multiverse worked. Grant then wrote about those entities in the Final Crisis series and called them the Monitors of Nil. These monitors, in context, are non-fictional. They are not from DC Comics, not technically. Similarly to how the Empty Hand is the embodiment of the reader from outside of the comic book that invaded the comic book and now lives inside of it, the monitors are contextually non-fictional deities from our real world. They oversee hypertime, which Grant says is outside of the concept of fiction entirely and includes both fictional space and non-fictional space. Number 3. The Cosmic Armor Superman. God, my PTSD, it's so strong, I can't. The Cosmic Armor is simply the visual of how the Overvoid wanted to see the concept of all story personified. All story of existence is the Cosmic Armor. Many scalers and forums believe the Cosmic Armor is just a thing that could be fought against by any other character. But they fail to understand that story is how the Overvoid prefers to see the flaw of existence. Grant confirms this. The multiverse is not seen as a mesh of characters and people and things and locations. The flaw of existence has a story, and story that will continue forever, that encompasses the story of all possibility and characters combined into one plot armor called the Cosmic Armor. The Overvoid prefers to see story and the entire sum of existence as this big suit of armor. The suit of armor is story itself. Here's Steve Orlando, the writer of Milk Wars and the Unexpected series, confirming that the Cosmic Armor is all story personified. Story has no limits, and it can pre-adapt to any future threat because all the future threats are already part of the armor. You can't combat it, you can't fight it. You cannot fight story and hope to win, because the concept of story includes every single character you'll ever create or that ever will be made any time in the future, or indefinitely in the past. The cosmic armor is the flaw itself. Everything not the overvoid is the cosmic armor. That's every single character there is, was, or ever will be. Story personified is the thought robot. Number 2, Mandrake. The overvoid was corrupted by the ideas and anything else that exists outside of its own mind. It strips off that corruption to dive further into existence. That corruption was given a name, Dax Novu. Dax continues to investigate the flaw. More little monitors are made, and Dax even takes a wife named Zilovala, and has a son named Nix Wotan. Later, Dax begins to feel corrupted too by this job he was given. The flaw begins to infect him as well, and to protect everyone from himself, he locks himself in a coffin on a world of nil in hopes of fighting off of his darkness. Sadly, the persona of Dax Novu is lost forever, and the evil within him takes over. This new part of Dax Novu is called Mandrake, the Dark Monitor. Mandrake is non-story, personified, according to the authors, and also the slipcover of Final Crisis. While the cosmic armor is story, Mandrake is specifically made to consume story by the overvoid. The overvoid takes the number 1 spot, of course. As Grant tells us, the overvoid, the monitor mind, is based on the Kabbalah and Vedic Hinduism's absolute void, of which all the darkness and the light is residing inside of. Yes, Grant is saying that the great darkness and the light are both within the absolute void of the monitor mind. Here, there is no duality. There are no concepts. Nothingness is still a concept that can be defined, and nothingness is Mandrake. However, even this falls prey to the unyielding delete key that is the overvoid. These concepts cannot exist in the overvoid, and the religious texts even tell us that the absolute void is a place that no light has ever touched, and that God hasn't manifested there. So remember when we said the source was called the Ein Sof Or just a little bit ago? There are 3 veils that exist outside of the Tree of Life, and the Tree of Life is essentially the multiverse's tangible and conceptual realms, and at the top of this is the Ein. The Ein is also the same as the absolute void. This is the monitor mind. Below this begins existence itself. Things that exist and that can be quantified and defined, that can be understood. The first realm is the Ein Sof, the conceptual energy factor that has no limits, but no actual mind of its own yet. It's not the personality of God, according to these religious views. And below that is the Ein Sof Or. This is the source. This is the creative personality. This is the De Mateus divine presence, and the source of the new gods. The religions say that no gods, no thing, not even the creator, can go to or interact with the absolute void, and to say God is part of this absolute void is incorrect. God is not part of the absolute void. God comes from this void. Back in the Lucifer series, Lucifer travels to a white void, and many comic fans believe this void to be the overvoid simply because it's called a void and it was white. Well, I'm here to drive a stake into the hearts of those scalers, as the Lucifer series also explains that the Lucifer white void is not the same as non-existence. And it was explained in the original Lucifer series and also explained in the next series that came out many years later. So ask yourselves why forums and wikis don't include this information. Ask yourselves why subscribers flock to any YouTuber who says the Lucifer void is the overvoid. You should be flocking to me now that you know the truth. The Lucifer void is explained to not be the same as non-being. However, the overvoid is non-being, so they can't be the same location. This is very simple logic that gets flung right out the window. As Grant mentions in this interview, the overvoid is the tippy top of the cosmology. There is nothing past it. By definition, everything else comes from this absolute void. There is no going there. There is nothing past it. So when other people say that the great darkness is beyond it, refer them to this interview where the absolute void is said to contain both the dark and the light. So that about does it for this list, so please excuse me while I go nuclear-proof my house before scalers and debaters and fans of fraudulent wiki statements come here to try to send me to the overvoid. Please like and subscribe. Okay, thanks, bye!